Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Utility Mode, where performance meets real life. I'm Sophie Curtin, elite athlete, student dietitian, and sports nutritionist. The wait is finally over. The 2026 NRLW season is finally here. After months of recruitment, preseason training, trial matches, we've got our first official team lists. Today, we're breaking down everything you need to know before round one. We'll cover biggest selection surprises, key positional changes from the trials that it could have carried into the season, and the players unavailable through injury or pregnancy that could have had major impacts on clubs. We'll also discuss the biggest off-season player movements, how these signings could influence each team's success, and which combinations I'm most excited to watch this weekend. Finally, I'll give my early predictions for the 2026 season, including who I think will make the finals, who could surprise the competition, and which teams still have a little bit of work to do. Round one always provides our first real indication of where every club sits. Some teams will confirm the hype, while other teams will have questions to answer already. From the preseason trials, we saw some positional changes that I believe have carried over through to round one. So we see Georgia Hale moving into hooker, and we see some other spine reshuffles, which I'll go through in a little bit more detail later. Again, some outside back positional changes and some new halves combinations. So, firstly, we'll get into it. Which teams look ready for the challenge for the Premiership? So, I've spoken about this previously. Although I think Roosters and Brisbane are still the heavyweight contenders and going to need to be challenged, I think that they're the favourites. But my dark horse or my smoky is the Wars. As I said, over their preseason, they've had some really good recruits, and looking at their trial performances as well, and the results in that, I think they're definitely going to be up there fighting for finals. I think the club that's taken the biggest step forward during the off-season was probably the Tigers. We saw their dominant win against the Dragons during the trials, as well as, again, some really, really positive signings for the club and hopefully help them lead into a better direction in the 2026 season. I do think that there are a few clubs that need some more time to build their combinations and just build in terms of, I guess, age and experience, and namely the Dragons and probably the Bulldogs as a second. Again, some really talented players there, but just not quite enough experience across key positions or across the whole squad in general, in both age, physicality, and then experience as well. I think we saw the results reflect that in the trials as well. We're also going to look at some strengths and weaknesses heading into the opening month of the season, which I'll go through in a little bit more detail when we're looking at the specific squads. My finals predictions. So I've got Roosters, Broncos, Warriors, Sharks, Parramatta, and Knights. There are a couple of teams that I'm a little bit unsure about there. There could be a surprise with the Tigers heading in there, or even the Titans or Cowboys having made it last season. So with some interesting selections and off-season signings, it was a little bit hard to predict because the first few weeks of the competition is always a little bit scrappy, having not played for so long for most of those players outside of Origin. The competition can kind of turn around quite quickly. And I guess the top separate themselves from the bottom half of the ladder. I think teams that could exceed expectations, as I said, Tigers, having been the wooden spoon the last few years, have had some really, really positive signings, and I imagine that they're going to have a much better season this year. Again, clubs facing the biggest challenges this year in 2026 are probably going to be the Dragons and the Bulldogs, as I said earlier, just their lack of squad depth, the lack of experience across the board, and just a really young squad. In future years, I'm sure they're going to thrive, and these investments will pay off. But I believe the next couple of years for both of them are going to be quite the building phase. So I spoke about my finals predictions. So going into round one predictions, again, this is a little bit hard, only going with one trial game into round one. It's difficult to choose. As I said, the beginning of both the NRL and NRLW seasons are very hard to predict. And sometimes it's flipping a coin and you get the odd occasion where the favourites aren't able to secure the win. So I'm interested to see how round one goes in terms of the results. It starts tonight, so the 2nd of July, I believe at 7:45 p.m. we have the Knights and Sharks kicking off with the first game of NRLW 2026 at Ocean Point Stadium, I believe. And I think I'm going to tip the Knights there. My only concern with that is the Sharks obviously playing at home, but they really struggled in the trial once the interchange players came onto the field. And with some, I guess, new players coming in with the likes of Maddie Ashby and a couple of other players, and losing Emma Veron and things like that, I'm just not sure how that's going to go. As I said, once those kind of starting middles come off, they really lost the momentum in their trial with that. And I just think with the control that, Kira and some of the other really experienced players at the Knights have with Higgins as well, I think they'll be able to play a more consistent game across the 70 minutes. I hope the Sharks prove me wrong. I do believe they'll be another competitive team, but it'll be interesting to see how two contenders go early on in the season. Second game, we've got Roosters and Titans. I'm going to go Roosters. Third game, we have Raiders and Dragons. I'm going to go Raiders. We have Brisbane and Cowboys. I'm going to go Brisbane. We've got Tigers and Parramatta, and this was probably one of the two games that really tripped me up. I didn't know who to go with, but I think I'm going to back the Tigers here. I think they've got a lot of proof, and they're going to come out swinging in round one. And then lastly, we've got Doggies and Warriors. I think the Warriors are going to comfortably win here. So they're my tips for round one. So we've got Newcastle, Roosters, Raiders, Broncos, Tigers, and the Warriors. Looking at some of the, I guess, key differences between NRL and NRLW going into round one tonight, we have 12 teams. So we have Brisbane, Sharks, Roosters, Warriors, Parramatta, Knights, Cowboys, Tigers, Doggies, and Raiders. We have 11 rounds, and then we have 3 weeks of finals. So we've got the preliminary final, the major final, and then the grand final. Our final series is top 6. We have a 70-minute game, so 35-minute halves instead of the 80-minute halves compared to the NRL. We don't have 6 again, so we have penalties instead. We don't have the 6-person bench. We still have the 4-person bench, and instead of 40-20s or 20-40s, we have the 40-30. Looking at some of the other differences between the rules of NRL and NRLW. NRLW has 10 interchanges compared to the NRL's 8. And I guess looking at, the squads and the game as a whole, I've gone through this in previous episodes, but just to quickly summarise, we've got a squad of 24 players plus 4 development players and then the 2 supplementary players in NRLW. We have a salary cap of $1,386,000 per club, with a minimum wage in 2026 of $46,200. If it is a season-ending injury, a development player can be upgraded, or they can use those supplementary players to replace them. In previous years, they've typically gone to reserve grade to bring up players and sign them. As I said, 11-round regular season and 3 weeks top 6 final season. For our NRLW coaches of the Raiders, we've got Darren Borthwick. For the Knights, we've got Ben Jeffries. For the Tigers, we've got new coach Craig Sandercock. Parramatta, we have Steve Georgalis. We have Braden Williami at the Doggies, Nathan Cross at the Dragons, Ron Griffiths at Warriors, Scotty Prince at the Brisbane Broncos, and Tony Herman at the Sharks. Most of them being, repeat coaches from previous years, so it's good to see some consistency there. In 2025, just looking at Dally M's and Rookie of the Years, we saw Tamika Upton with Dally M award winner. Again, I think she'll be up there in a close option for 2026. Such an amazing player. And we saw Rookie of the Year with Shalom Sayoso. Apologies if I put your name. I realise I've also forgotten 3 of the club's coaches. We had Karen Murphy with the Titans, Ricky Henry at Cowboys, and then John Strange at the Roosters. Going into some more details about the competition structure. Originally, in 2028, there was 4 NRLW teams. So the original teams were Roosters, Broncos, Warriors, and Dragons. And then in COVID, we saw the Warriors fall out, being replaced by Parramatta. And then slowly we've seen the addition of the few new teams, such as Doggies, Raiders, Sharks, Titans, Tigers, Cowboys. I think that's all of them. I believe that's all 12 teams. So originally 4 teams in 2028. In 2026, there's 12 teams with discussion in the next year or two looking to expand to 14 teams. So we'll see how that goes. There's rumours going around that 3 teams are fighting for 2 positions. So from what I've understood and what I've heard through the grapevine, Rabbitohs, Panthers, and the Dolphins are fighting for the next 2 spots in the next expansion, which is predicted to be in 2028. So the current CBA and the girls' first ever CBA is due to finish in 2027. So they'll be negotiating the new CBA shortly. And yeah, there's rumours to go around that they'll add another 2 teams in 2028 at the earliest. The reigning premiers from the 2025 season are the Brisbane Broncos, who defeated Roosters 2028. And impressively, but also frustratingly, they have won 4 out of the 8 premierships in the NRLW, which is the most of any club. And the second place for the most premierships is tied between the Roosters and the Knights. Both very dominant teams, and we saw Knights go back to back there, which is quite impressive. Going into some key signings from different clubs and also looking at some key losses between the clubs. So these are probably top signings from most of the teams. So we'll go Jessie Southwell from Knights to Broncos, Indy Bostock from Dragons to Titans. Again, her brother being up in Queensland makes complete sense. Crystal Blackwell from Cowboys to Raiders, Keely Joseph from Broncos to Eels, Gail Broughton and Mele Hufanga from Broncos to the Warriors, Kira Dube from Cowboys to Knights, and Shaylee Bent from Titans to West Tigers. Looking at some other really impactful signings and player movements for the 2026 season. For the Broncos, we see them somehow get stronger with some key additions. So Shanna Mato returns from maternity leave and was released by the Titans to join the Brisbane Broncos. We see Tavana Papali arrive from the Roosters. We see rugby union star Caitlin Irwin join the club, and Jessie Southwell join the spine to replace Gale, who went to the Warriors, which again is threatening when you think about all of their spine currently. You've got Jessie Southwell, Tamika Upton, and then Ali Brigginshaw in the halves and at fullback, and then depending who they picked, obviously for round 1 in hooker, they've got a few different options there. But looking at round 1 for Brisbane, I believe they selected... Just trying to find their hooker. Jada Ferguson, makes sense. And then they've got a few different other options in their squad as well that can play big minutes at hooker. So we see Remy Hickinsman at 14, but we've also got some other players within the squad that can also jump in if needed. But Jada Ferguson had a really, really good season last year and the year before as well. So I'm sure she will kill it again this season. Looking at some losses and key signings for the Roosters, we saw them lose Tavana Papali, as I said, went to Broncos, but some key additions here. We saw Kaylee Simpson and Tatum Bird. The Rooster squad largely remains the same, despite signing one of the cross-coders. I believe she is playing in the middle off the bench this week, but dual Olympian and Australian Sevens gold medalist Soraya Paki signed with the Sydney Roosters, making them even more dominant and a better squad and more well-rounded squad than what they already were, which again is very scary coming into the next season. Sharks sign international New Zealander Nevada George, as well as, again, one of the cross-coders, Maddie Ashby, who comes in at 14 for them this weekend. Titans probably make the biggest cross-code signing with Tegan Levi, Australian Rugby Sevens player, coming in and starting in the halves. Some key retentions with Jess Ellison, Sienna Lafipo, and Georgia Hale, obviously running that squad with their experience. Tigers, again, landing some really strong representative players with Shaylee Bent from the Tigers, Holly Wheeler, and Racine McGregor, in addition to Sarah Tokatsuki and Kezi Apps being some of their most experienced players there. And probably the biggest storyline of the entire signing period, arguably, Tegan Berry leaving St George after 2026. So she's the club's all-time try scorer, has the most points, and I believe the most appearances for the club. So a massive loss in speed, strike, and also marketability. So it'll be interesting to see how they go after losing her next season. But they were quite active in the off season anyway, I guess, to prepare for that loss that I assume they saw coming. There's been no announcements of where she's signed yet, but I imagine Tegan Berry has got her hands in a few pies already. And hopefully in a few weeks we see where she's officially off to for the 2027 season. But looking at 2026, we have Shanae Sosolka, we have Arabella McKenzie from the Wallaroos, we have Montana Clifford, we have Brooke Anderson, and we also see Charlotte Basham leaving to Canberra. Future signings, we've got Emma Veron, Alexis, and Angelina returning in 2027. So Emma Veron was due to play for Cronulla this year, but due to pregnancy, she's been ruled out. But she did sign a contract with the Dragons for, I believe, a few years, starting in 2027. The Knights signing Kira Dibb, which is probably their biggest signing of the off-season, and retaining some big names, Taylor Predabon, Kayla Romagnac. Again, some of their other key players have signed extensions as well. I saw the other day some of the younger girls extending for a couple more years, which is exciting for them. The Raiders, some additions. Charlotte Basham from the Dragons, Grace Kukatai from the Knights, and then Eva McGrath as a development player from the West Tigers. And then again, looking at Warriors, signing a couple of other players outside of our two biggest ones with Gale and Mele. We see Jasmine Hiruwai from the Wallaroos, Natalia Hickling, and then we also see another Aussie Sevens player turned rugby league player with their outside backs. I believe there's only one. Just want to confirm that I haven't forgotten anyone. But Stacey Walker, I believe, is the only other than Gale. I believe Stacey Walker is the only other Union crosscoder this year that's joined the Warriors. Looking at some other players who have been ruled out for the 2026 season, whether that's through injury or whether that's through pregnancy. We have quite a few ACL injuries as well as pregnancies. So these aren't all the players, but these are quite a few players who are missing. I believe there was another one from Brisbane that I might be missing, as well as some other news through the grapevine that I've heard of players doing long-term injuries, but it hasn't been announced officially, so I'm just going to keep that to myself. We've got Emma Veron that I already mentioned, Talia Holmes, who has just had a child. Emma Veron is still pregnant. Tyler King, pregnant. Jakai Whitfield has just announced her pregnancy, which is crazy. Very late notice for that one, so that one only came out a few weeks ago. Hayley Maddock, again, very recent, only just come out in public that she is pregnant and will not be playing in the 2026. Jade Fanua, pregnant. Piuka, Berryman Duff, pregnant as well. And then we've got a couple of injuries with Shalom Saseo, Lily Peacock, Bronte Wilson, and Tyra Watire. Again, I believe they're all ACLs or very long-term injuries there. So unfortunate for all of those players, but that's definitely going to have a mix-up in the selections for round one. In terms of some key stats, I saw these this morning from Watch Her Footy and the Random Stats guy, so I thought I would add these into the episode because I thought they were really interesting. So some of the all-time NRLW records are held by some of probably the most obvious players, but we'll go through them now. So most NRLW games is tied between Ali Brigginshaw and Keely Nizza with 56 games. Most NRLW tries, as you can probably guess, Tamika Upton, all-time try scorer with 46 tries. Most NRLW points goes to Jocelyn Kelleher at the Roosters with 267. Makes sense. Has been playing for quite a few years. Big body in the halves. Has played representative footy, and is their goal kicker. So 267 points for Jocelyn. Most NRLW field goals is 3 each, with Lauren Brown and Zahara Tamara tying there. Most NRLW try assists, again, Tamika Upton, all-time NRLW record holder with 43 try assists. Most NRLW run meters, Isabel Kelly with 9,529 run meters. Again, one of the players who has played every season of NRLW in a winning team. So again, making finals every year and having extra opportunities to have additional run meters is going to add up quite quickly. Again, another representative player there. Most NRLW offloads, this one doesn't surprise me at all. 95 offloads, again, another player who's played every season with the Broncos, Chelsea Lenarduzzi. Most NRLW tackle breaks, again, this one circling back to Isabel Kelly, 263 tackle breaks. Very strong, powerful, and experienced outside back. Most NRLW tackles, Georgia Hale, amazing player, tough as nails, as I said, played every season and is in the middle, so plenty of opportunity to make lots of tackles, and especially being as fit as she is, she plays most games 70 minutes, so 2,060 tackles in the NRLW. And they were the very cool stats. Again, thanks to Random Stats Guy and Watch Her Footy for posting those. Some incredible players, some incredible stats. And now we'll go into a little bit more detail in each of the squads for this weekend, but going through the game times and locations as well. So all of the fixtures can be viewed on, I believe, 9 Now, KO, Foxtel, and then some of the games as well on Gem. So make sure you are watching the game. So Thursday night, we've got 7:45 kickoff with the Sharks and Knights at Ocean Protect Stadium. Saturday, first game, we've got Titans and Roosters at Seabus Super Stadium at 12:45. Next game, Saturday, we've got Dragons and Raiders at 3:15 at St George Venues Jubilee. And we've got Brisbane versus Cowboys at 5:15 Saturday at Suncorp. And then on Sunday, we have Tigers and Parramatta at 11:50 at CommBank. And then the Warriors and Bulldogs at FMG Stadium at 1:45. So they're all Australian Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you watch the games and get involved and support the women's NRLW. Looking at now the individual team lists, so we can go through some of the players and some of the key positional changes and surprising selections, or non-selections, I should say. So we'll start with the Raiders. So we've got Sheridan Gallagher at fullback, Elise Simpson, Leigh at centre, Bobby Law at centre, Mackenzie Wiki at wing, Crystal Blackwell, Zahara Tamara in the halves, Chloe Saunders at 8, Shante Tamara at 9, Sophie Holloman, Jordan Preston, Charlotte Basham, and Maima Taufa at 13, Emma Barnes, Grace Kemp, Holly Mae Dodd, and Grace Kukutai all on the bench. Not too many surprising selections there. Destiny Mino Sinapati for Titans at fullback. We've got Georgia Gray and Ivani Asako, or Ivani Politi, formerly known, on the wings. We've got Jamie Chapman heading back to the centres with Phoenix Rain Hippie. On the other side, during the trials, Jamie spent a lot of time on the edge, so it's good to see her back in centres and not on the wing. Then we have, as I said earlier, Tegan Levi jumping straight into the halves, paired with Lauren Brown, our cross-code player. So it'll be interesting to see how they go. And we've got Leica Clark and Jessica Ellison up front in the middles. Georgia Hale moving from 13 to 9. I'm sure she'll go into lock later in the game. But we've got Dakota Thompson and Ivana Lolesio at second rows, with Sienna Lafipo at 13. We've got Lily Rose Kolk, Jasmine Soliola, Tash Penatani, and Leilani Montgomery all on the bench lining up for the Titans. Round 1 for the Roosters, a pretty standard team for them. Their squads don't change too much each season, but probably one surprising signing in there with the late signing of Soraya Paki with our cross code. Union players I mentioned earlier. So we've got Corbin backside at fullback, Bridie Parker and Jamie Frassard on our wings, Jess Surges and Isabel Kelly in the centres. Jocelyn Kelleher and Taryn Aiken back from ACL injury will be steering the team around in the halves. Millie Elliott and Otessa Pule up front. Keely Nizar, formerly known as Keely Davis, in 9. Soraya Paki and Jasmine Strange starting in second row. Then Liv Koenig at lock for the Roosters. On the bench, we've got Shorten Burton, Macy Carley, Rima Butler, and Keely Simpson. Interesting seeing Rima Butler starting on the bench after a dominant season in 2025, as well as getting to play Origin in 2026. So interesting to see the powerhouse come off the bench for the Roosters. Dragons, a very young team, but some familiar faces there with Tegan Berry in fullback, Mariah Paseka, who I believe was development last year, but got upgraded due to injuries for a few games last year and played on the wing. We saw Shanae Sozolka and Keely Brown in the centres, Jamie Millard, who we saw play a few games at the back end of last year on the edge, Talia Fuimaono, and Casey Ray in the halves. Interestingly, having Zali Hopkins at 18th man after playing every game last year, I believe. So must have been a very competitive preseason. We've also got Madison Mulhall and Ruby Jean Kennard Ellis up front. Again, another interesting signing and selection there with Ruby Jean, having played most of the year in reserve grade last year for Parramatta and the year before as well, coming in and out of the squad and mostly playing off the bench. So for her to get a starting position, she must have had a really good preseason for the Dragons, which is great to see. Montana Clifford, one of their new signings, and Hannah Southwell playing on the edge in second row. Interesting move, but makes sense with Brooke Anderson going into 13 as their captain for the Dragons. We've got Tori Shipton, Trinity, Ella Costa, Soraya Palapale, all on the bench for the Dragons. We saw Tori and a couple of the other players play a few games last year and absolutely killing it. So looking forward to see how they dominate in 2026. But again, a very young and inexperienced squad. Going into Parramatta, we've got Abby Church at fullback, Fleur Jin and Martha Martaeli in the wing. We've got Rory Owen and Lindsay Tua at centres. We've got Casey Tohuhiku and Rachel Pearson's up in the halves. Again, no surprise there. They've been quite consistent in the squad. Elsie Albert again. Ruben Charrington at 9. Bosk, Kapu, Kapow, Chloe Jackson, Mahalia Murphy, their captain, in the second rows, and Kennedy Charrington at 13. Tanika Todhana at 14. No surprise there. Tess McWilliams, another young gun that it came through the ranks and debuted, I believe, last year. Had a really good season. They've got Rosemary Beckett at 16, and then Revere Lee Allo at 17. For Cowboys, we've got Talara Banlett at fullback with Jakai Whitfield out due to pregnancy. Margot Vella, a late swap from Cronulla Sharks. So she was originally signed with Cronulla Sharks for 2025 after doing her ACL at the Dragons in previous seasons. But midway through preseason signed with Cowboys. I'm assuming to make way for Maddie Ashby. So I guess a good deal for Margot Vella because I believe she was a development player at Cronulla and now she's in top 24 at the Cowboys. So good on her, starting winger for the Cowboys. Francesca Goldthorpe and Jasmine Peters in the centres. Sian Williams at the other wing. Abigail Roach and Rosie Kelly, some younger, inexperienced halves after losing Kira Dibb. S.A. Banu, another dominant middle, consistent for the Cowboys. Emma Manzelman, absolute freak at 9. Mackenzie Wheel, again, another competitive middle with Talisha Harden. Haley J. Orman Maunsell at second row. And then Bree Chester at 13, again, who had a very good season last year. Lydia Toru Queedley, Taylor Curtis, Emma Vivers, and Tafau Asua on the bench. For Tigers, we've got Caitlin Turnbull at fullback, Emily Bass and Rakia Horn in the centres. Emily Bass and Lily Rogan on the wings, Rakia Horn and Shanae Lendl in centres. Interesting, Shanae normally plays in the second row, so it'll be interesting to see how she goes on the edge. In centres, Lasana Lutu and Racing McGregor in the halves, Sarah Togatuki and Shanice Monshao up front in our front row. Sal Minor at 9 had really good game in the trials. Kezzy Apps and Shaylee Bent in second rows, and Holly Wheeler at 13. Interestingly, doesn't look like they've got a out-and-out hooker on the bench. I mean, Faith or Naomi could jump in there if needed, but it'll be interesting to see how much game time Salma's able to handle being a smaller body and with fitness. But we've got Christian Pio at 14, Tara Ranki at 15, and then Faith Manira and Naomi Gesser at 16 and 17 on the bench. For doggies, we have Andy Robinson at fullback, Moana Courtenay, Danae Nankerville, and Monica Tagoa, Elizabeth McGregor, all in the back five for doggies. We've got Shaq and Taylor Preston up front in the halves. We've got Angelina Katoa and Alexis in prop with Ebony Pryor, Little Gun at hooker, Pauline Suliruka, Tamika Jones at second row, Leilani Wilson at 13, Mary Jane Tauto, Giovanna Suani, Hope Millard, and Kalasapani Hopawate on the bench for doggies. So again, some new faces there, unfamiliar faces and names. It'll be interesting to see how they go in 2026, but some key players returning from last seasons as well. Nearly there. We've got a couple of teams left. So we've got the Warriors, Uppy Nichols at fullback, Lavinia and Tisha and Ematina and Peyton in the back five for the Warriors. We've got Gail Broughton and Patricia Maliapo at 6 and 7. Interestingly, I would have picked Gail to be selected at 7, purely just due to her experience playing in the NRLW for multiple seasons compared to Patricia. But Patricia's named at 7, so it'll be interesting to see how she goes steering the team around after being 6 in the 2025 season. We've got Aneta and Maya Hill Moana playing up front in prop. We've got Capri at 9, Marie and Shakira at second row, and Ashley Matapo at lock. We've got Jasmine Hiruwai, Harata Butler, Laishan Albert Jones, and Krista Bella all on the bench. Some familiar faces there again, changing it up with their positions. So Harata Butler and Albert Jones often started last year, so some new faces with Maya Hill coming back from pregnancy, pushing them onto the bench. We've got Sharks, Jada Taylor at fullback, Georgia Ravix, Rihanna Byers, Anessa Biddle, and Cassie Staples, all some familiar faces there. Georgia Hanaway at 6, Shante Kiriaratu, again some familiar faces in their halves, with Ellie Johnson, Quincy Dodd, Caitlin Johnson-Green, Manalitia, and Chana Palata in second row. We've got Tegan Dimmick at 13, coming from the doggies. Madison Ashby, again, their newest signing in 14. Stephanie Faulkner, Nevada George, and Jada Tafau on the bench. We've got Lillian White, Janice Parker, Sydney Taylor, Tanika Willison, Mercedes Ciala, all in our back five for Knights. Interestingly, Bo Tilvetti Welsh not selected for round 1 for the NRLW Knights team. I believe she's playing Harvey Norman for round 1 at fullback, so hopefully she can work her way back into the squad. Then we've got Kira Dibb at 6, Georgia Roach at 7, Taylor Predabon at 8, Olivia Higgins at 9, Tiana Davidson at 10, Fane for now at 11, Jasmine Meeks at 12, Kayla Romagnac at 13, Jules Kilpatrick at 14, Sienna Yo, Amelia Pasakala, and Simone Karapani at the bench for Newcastle Knights. I'm second guessing my selection there for Sharks and Newcastle, but I'm just going to have to go with that. After reading out their squad, their starting team is so strong for Sharks, but again, I just don't know with their bench if they're able to maintain that throughout the whole 70 minutes. So I guess I'll see at 7:45 tonight if I'm right. And then last team, we've got Brisbane Broncos round 1 selection with Tamika Upton at fullback, Kerry Johnson, Georgia Bartlett, Julia Robinson, and Caitlin Irwin, and their back five with some new faces. We've got Ali Brigginshaw moving to 6, with Jessie Southwell coming in playing at 7. Ali's announced her retirement after the 2026 season, so hopefully she's able to have another successful stint with the Brisbane Broncos. She also has given up her captaincy to Tamika Upton. We've got Lillian Yarrow and Brianna Clark up front in the props. Jada Ferguson, as I said earlier, up at 9. Lauren Dam and Romy Teitzel at second row. Bree Spedborough at 13. Remy Hickinsman, Chelsea Lenarduni, Shannon Marto, and Hakeem Walker on the bench for Brisbane Broncos. So again, looking at all of these squads, good to see some of the familiar faces coming back, but also good to see some youth coming through. I'm not 100% sure how I feel about all of the crosscode signings because, look, they're great athletes, don't get me wrong, and they deserve to be playing at a high level. But I just find it frustrating when clubs talk on and on and on about their junior pathways and, rugby league roots and selecting from within, and then going and signing players who aren't even from the same sport. And then I guess looking at it as well, players who are at quite a high level, whether they're development players or not getting selected in the squads, or they're in reserve grade and should be in NRLW, but they can't because of these union signings or these crosscode signings. It'll be interesting to see if they ever introduce rules that they have to play X amount of games or X amount of seasons for rugby league before they can play NRLW. I doubt that'll ever happen, but there's been talks about that. And then also looking as well, we've had some previous signings and they haven't always been super successful coming from rugby union. So with all of these new ones this year, it'll be interesting to see whether they are able to, I guess, transition smoothly. But yeah, in history, there hasn't always been a smooth transition from rugby union to rugby league, with some big name players having come across during COVID and in previous seasons. So this year, it'll be interesting to see whether some of those big name players, such as your Tegan Levis and Maddie Ashby and Soraya Paki, come through and absolutely kill it, or if they are struggling to find their feet. But I guess we'll find out after round one. But whether you're a passionate NRLW supporter, player, coach, or someone wanting to stay across the latest developments in the women's game, this episode provides a comprehensive preview of everything you need to know before the NRLW season 2026 kicks off tonight at 7:45 with Knights versus Sharks at Ocean Point Stadium, Sharks home ground. Tune in, and I'll see you guys next week for round one review.